Today what we're doing is translating sentences into equations. So we're going to fold this over like this. And then the other side will be translating equations into sentences. Let's go ahead and start with the one that says twice a number. I'm going to go ahead and fold it over so it's easier for me to write on. What we got is twice a number divided by 2 is 9. Twice means the multiplication of 2. Don't forget, we're not using this notation in the equation. It's just so we can understand. A number is something that we don't know, a variable that we don't know. So we could use any letter. I would prefer N or X, but we can use anything. I would just rather you not use O. It looks confusing to me. It might look like a 0. So any number is a variable, and we're going to call this one X. Divided by, don't forget, we're just doing it like this to understand the problem, but not to write it this way. We're going to use fraction bars for division. Divided by 2 is the equal sign -9. So the sentence that I would like for you to write is 2x divided by 2 is equal to -9. I'm just going to write it over here. I'm going to make a little separation and tell you that if you put parentheses like this, it is multiplication, and that's another method that we could write it. But you need to know that this is the same thing as 2x. So we don't have to write it. We don't have to write it. The next one, a number b. So this time what it wants the variable to be is b. Divided by, so don't forget, we're going to use a fraction bar, by 3 is less than. I want you to go ahead and make a note, if you have a highlighter, highlight, that what happens with less than is that it changes the order of the operation. So we're going to have to write C first. Anytime you see less than, you change the order of what it needs to subtract and put the second thing first. So what do I mean? B divided by, because we're going to use a fraction bar now, 3 is, and then C is what you have to write first. Less than means minus, so -6. The next one. 2 more than x times 6 is 11 more than y times 4. So just take it a little bit at a time. This 10 more than is the plus sign. Be careful, we're going to do inequalities later, and you're going to have is more than, and that means something different. That means the inequality greater than. But for right now, we're just adding. X times 6 is equal to 11, so is 11 more than, so we got another plus sign right here, y times 4. I'm going to write it as most students understand it, and then we're going to clean it up so you can give me your best answer. 10 plus x times 6 is equal to 11 plus y times 4. And this would get you credit on a test, but the way we need to write it is by putting that number first. When you put the number first, it's called a coefficient. A coefficient is when the number goes first with a variable. So we need to write it like this. 10 plus 6x is equal to 11 plus 4y. And that's the best way to write it. I'm going to make a little note right here. Don't forget that 6x is the same thing as 6 times x, only that we don't have to write the parentheses, so we don't. If we don't have to, we're not going to. The difference of x, so difference means subtraction. So I'm going to go like this. And then I'm going to put a minus sign right here. I'm going to highlight it too so we can remember that we're subtracting those two. Is the same as, so that's my equal sign, 3 times the sum. So when you see this right here where it says times the sum, this is a clue to make sure that you put in parentheses. Times the difference, times the product, times the quotient. Anytime you see a pattern like that, it will need parentheses. So your answer is x minus y equals 3 times x plus 2, because we're adding those together, it says sum. 5. The perimeter of a square is 4 times the length. So we usually try to use the variables that make sense for the problem. For example, the perimeter, the p would be a good variable for the perimeter. Square is just telling you the code that all the sides are the same. Is my equal sign 4 times and then the length. So here we didn't use the number, we actually used the words to identify those variables. So P for perimeter is 4 times the length. Now when you have an L, we don't want to use the lowercase l, so let's make some notes. The lowercase l looks like a number 1. So we don't want that. And then we don't want to use a capital letter. That's why I use the lowercase cursive l, the lowercase cursive l. And this problem had 2 different equations, but they didn't, variables, but it didn't tell you that we were using them. They used words to represent them. Okay, the other side. Now what we're going to do is write equations. And there's a different ways to writing them. I'm just going to choose one. I'm going to highlight this minus sign because I want to use less than. Don't forget, when you use less than, it changes the order. When you're writing the translation, it is a complete sentence, so you need to start with a capital letter and end with a period. So we're going to write 2 times x. Different ways that you can write this. Times, you could use any word that will indicate multiplication, and here you have to say it though. Unlike the reverse, where this notation implies it, when you write it in a sentence, we have to say the word times. Less than 12. So don't forget, the little statement less than changes the order. That's what I did. And we can put is 5. Don't forget the period to end the sentence. On the next one, how we say this number is squared. You could also say to the power of 2 with an exponent of 2, and they would still get you the correct answer. But since this is a lowercase letter at the beginning of a sentence, what I would like to add is the variable. The variable a squared plus 3. Don't forget, we have to write times. It doesn't have the notation for multiplication, but we know it is, so we're going to write times. B. We already used is, so I'm going to use equals 7. And don't forget the period at the end. Yes, I would like for you to write the name of the numbers instead of the notation of the numbers. Number 3. What we have to do is make sure that we do this part first. So there's a lot of different ways to doing that, but you could write first. Add x and 3. And then you could put comma, divide by 2. And then you can put then, because you want to do all of this first, then subtract 6. I already used is, I already used equals. Let's say was 10. Don't forget the period at the end. The next one, we have this parentheses right here. So we could do 5 times, and we can say the sum, because that's clue for us that we needed parentheses, so that's the way we can write it. 5 times the sum of x and 4. I'm going to go ahead and use is. You could use is the same as. There's a lot of expressions that you can use, but I'm going to go ahead and use is. And since we haven't used minus, we already used less than. We use subtract. Well, I'm going to use minus. X minus y. If you feel comfortable with one word for these operations, you're welcome to use it over and over again. I would just like for you to challenge yourself and use different words.